time for the final word in sports all across the state. You're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts, Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
And a pleasant good evening to you and yours, and welcome into Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network on this Monday, the second day of July 2018, along with Professor Tom Hayes, yours truly, Will Pelagic. We are not joined today by Phil Kornbluth. His chair will be empty here for the next couple of days as he, like I did last week, takes in some well-deserved R&R. I believe he is in a place right now that resembles the surface of the sun. I think he's in Vegas right now enjoying 107 degrees. Might also be how many dollars he's down by now. Who knows? Depends on whether he played the Ponies or whether he played LeBron to K-Max Lakers. Don't know, but, you know, we'll see how that works out for him. And we look forward to getting him back here pretty soon. We look forward to hearing from you at 800-956-7266, your two-way Palmetto Sports telephone number on this Monday. We'll get you in on a variety of topics, including our approach to September. 1 month closer we are now. In fact, 2 months away from the start of the college football season. We're going to hear from one of the foremost college football prognosticators, Phil Steele. He will join us at the bottom of this hour, just after 6:30. We'll get his thoughts not only on USC and Clemson, but the potential teams that could be pitfalls for them as they both quest toward SEC and ACC supremacy. It's a new day dawning in the upstate, at USC Upstate in Spartanburg, where the Spartans have entered the Big South Conference, officially made on Sunday. This is their first day of business. We'll talk to their newly appointed athletic director, Daniel Feig. He will join us at the top of the next hour at 7:05. Again, feel free to join us on Twitter at SportsTalkSC, also on Periscope at SportsTalkSC. You can see our beautiful faces there on our Twitter account at SportsTalkSC. Feel free to leave a comment as well. And of course, the number 800-956-7266 Pro. You heard my conversation earlier with Phil Steele, and before we let the bag, or we don't want to let the cat out of the bag here with him, but one of the things I found very curious is the fact that he's really high on South Carolina, and I think that has become the very en vogue pick for a lot of people. And I'm curious, when we meet 2 weeks down in Atlanta for the SEC Media Days, how the media, how much will that kind of en vogueness contribute to where people are feeling about with the Gamecocks, because there's a lot of optimism for Will Muschamp's ball club.
Well, one of the things that I think about is the fact that Will Muschamp was really regarded as a tremendous coach, even when he was in his early 30s as an assistant. And, of course, we all know the litany of things he's been doing around the Southeastern Conference, at Auburn, head coach at Florida. Before going to Florida, was the head coach in waiting at the University of Texas. Mm-hmm. So he's got a lot of tentacles all over the Southeast and into Texas. But the big thing, Will, is nobody really saw how good an organizer he has become since he had the lessons at Florida, and the way he intricately put together the staff at South Carolina and continues to augment that staff with the hires he made in the offseason, that I think people are getting, you know, some of them are drinking the Muschamp Kool-Aid, that this guy knows what he's doing.
You know, the thing, and I spent a lot of time while I was on the beach in Hilton Head, and by the way, I will brag on South Carolina beaches for a second. There are no better beaches than the ones we have here in the Palmetto State, bar none. You can take and leave South Beach. You can take and leave North Carolina. You can get the heck away from me when you're talking about Galveston and Texas and the Gulf of Mexico. Even my native Jones Beach in New York, nothing's got anything on South Carolina beaches. So I will say that first and foremost. But as I was relaxing on the beach and reading my Phil Steele and kind of reading up on my Athlon as well, and looking at some of the other places that are starting to predict things, the more and more I think about this, I'm not worried about the South Carolina offense as much as I probably should have been, because I think they understand the pressure that's on them right now. I personally think there's more pressure on the South Carolina defense because of what was lost inside on defensive tackle, because of what was lost inside the secondary and because of the loss of Sky Moore. I know Bryce Williams comes back. I know TJ Brunson's a big factor in the middle. But in my mind, they're going to be more inclined, or at least I think they're more inclined to have to figure out how they build on the foundation that they set last year, with a lot of the cast of characters who set that foundation not there and or missing.
Well, the key thing you got to remember is the first year that Muschamp was here and won 6 games, there was no way he should have won 6 games, and he was dealing with wire and string at that point in time.
Rubber band. He would have killed for rubber band.
And absolutely no kind of depth on the defense. I don't worry about the defense, not so much from personnel, but because I know who's running the defense.
Right.
Muschamp has some kind of ungodly record of something like 80 to 85% wins when his team scores only about 18 points.
Right.
So that tells you his defense knows how to keep the score down. This offense, I think, the pressure is not on them, Will. I think, as I said before, whatever happened before, I think personalities put pressure on that defense, and certain personalities are not there anymore. And I think they're ready to really take the governors off and really explode this year.
Well, this is the reason why I say this about South Carolina's offense. Just looking at the teams that they play, what defense that's out there on their schedule scares you? And I know you could say the same thing last year, but the one thing that's different about this year is that you have a Georgia team that, I don't want to call them depleted, but it's not the same Georgia defense as last year. And you get them at home. You got to go to Florida. I understand that, but everything else should be a winnable game, I think. I'm not saying like they're all winnable games outside of course, the final weekend against Clemson. That, of course, is obviously their biggest uphill battle. But I look at every game on this schedule and I see an opportunity for victory. And I know that they are not putting Brian McClendon in that position right now. If they didn't think that he could make that offense, which was putrid. We know it was putrid last year. They're not
compared to expectations.
Well, compared to expectations,
because the offense wasn't putrid, but expectations, injuries, that cost them. When Debo went, a lot of the plan went,
right,
and that should not happen. But I tell you what, it did add a plus to that because the Smith guys had to play as freshmen
or trade shot,
those guys are more experienced because of Debo's injury. And now you got and if Drake Davis could ever stay healthy, you've got about 6 or 7 receivers that could play for anybody. Now, catching Georgia when you do, there's no doubt in my mind that Georgia has recruited outstanding football players.
Of course.
But they're young.
Of course.
The Georgia in the 10th game of next year won't be the Georgia's defense in the second game of the year when South Carolina catches them.
I look at it almost
it's timing which will help South Carolina as far as catching Georgia is concerned.
I look at it akin to this way. Remember we were talking about this with Auburn going into the Clemson game last year. The Auburn team you're going to see final week of the season, much different team than Clemson saw in the second week when they got them at Death Valley. Now, the fact is, the advantage will come to South Carolina in this case, obviously, with Georgia coming in. I think you could see a very similar situation. The only thing that you do have is you have a quarterback who has made it to the national championship game, and he'll make that happen. But the other part of it is the large cast of characters, the wide receivers, the running backs, offensive line, defense. That's all going to be gone. So in my mind, you're going to have very much a Bulldog team that has to learn, quote unquote, on the job in order to make things happen when it comes to that game in the second weekend of September. 800-956-7266 is the phone number. We'll look at Clemson next and kind of around the ACC because I'm struggling to find a team that could maybe be a spoiler, but there could be one. Don't steal my thunder, Proso. Don't steal my thunder. There might be one that scares me more, and it's not a team that's clad in southwestern or southeastern Alabama. And I'll explain why when we come back here on Sports Talk. You know, it is funny, Pro, how everything has become so LeBron-centric in the NBA. It really is.
Yeah, what gets me about what has happened in the last few years, and I know these guys are winners and champions, but when Magic and Bird were going great and they had those teams in Boston and Los Angeles, they always used to say, one man cannot win a championship. You got to have a team. Now, you know, since Jordan and LeBron, they start selling the one-man deal as if one man can win everything. Just totally diametrically opposed to the philosophy they talked about when Magic and Bird were playing, because they were two guys that could pass and they were good at creating plays, and they made people around them better.
Right.
But now you're trying to pump the one man. And let's face it, it's all about the money, because what is the first thing people talking about in LA?
How much
23,
money?
He's going to wear 23. The jerseys are selling like hotcakes.
We'll talk more about that a little bit later on in the program. Feel free to join us, 800-956-7266. We're going to get into a little bit later. We got the news late Friday from Ray Tanner about the fact that there are a bunch of cities in the running for the USC-Clemson neutral site game. And believe me, the fact that there is so much consternation about that game just proves how much baseball means to people in this state. I'm not trying to say it as a moment of jest, but I'm just telling you that this has probably garnered more discussion, more partisan discussion of anything than we've had that doesn't involve anything about play on the field. Just the venue of one game has allowed that has allowed that discussion. We'll talk more about that later. Also, did want to set the menu. This is a bit of a quirky week with the holiday. Tomorrow, we are doing a very special thing with the folks at the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. So we're going to have a full 2-hour edition of SC Wild. Captain Billy Dino will be in here for the duration tomorrow with me, and we're going to go over some 4th of July safety tips when it comes to, you know, if you want to go out hunting, you want to do some waterfowl, you want to do fishing, boater safety, fireworks, a whole thing, a whole 4th of July safety edition of Sports Talk. Not only safety, but also how to enjoy yourself in the great outdoors in our Palmetto State. That'll be for the full 2 hours tomorrow. And then Wednesday, we will have a show for you. It will sound like Phil and I are here in the studio, but we won't be, because we have a special 4th of July special. We're going to go back and revisit some of our conversations with the coaches of football inside the state to preview the fall, look back for the spring, and get you as ready as possible. So when you're watching or listening to your 4th of July fireworks, crack on Sports Talk. We will still be on from 6 until 8 Wednesday, even though we won't be physically here. So don't call us on Wednesday, because no one will be here to answer the phone, but we do have a program for you. We'll be back live to you on Thursday night. So I just wanted to make sure that that was at least made clear for those of you who will be with us here this week. We also know a lot of you might be listening to us on vacation. If you take us with you on your vacation, use the TuneIn Radio app. You want to use the Point Radio in Columbia as your guide. That is the one station that does not preempt us for any reason whatsoever. The Point Radio, WQCL in Columbia, that is our affiliate that you use on TuneIn Radio, and you can get us anywhere in the world. Wonder if Korn is doing so in Vegas. If not, I would be very, very disappointed. And we also have some very awesome affiliate news to bring you here in the coming weeks. We're very excited about that. We will bring that to you here as the days go on. To the Clemson Tigers, again, we're going to talk to Phil Steele at 6:30, just after 6:30, about what's going on with them. And, you know, more and more about this ACC Pro. I look at it as Clemson and a cast of misfit toys. The misfit toys being the other teams, not necessarily Clemson. Clemson is not a misfit in any way, shape, or form. The more and more I look at the other teams in the Atlantic, I can't look at Florida State and be sold on what they're selling and what they're bringing to the table. And it's funny how much the preseason prognostications go on the Atlantic. And I even look back to last year. It was the teams that basically had Clemson coming to them in the Atlantic. The fact that they have Florida State and Boston College, and Phil Steele's magazine is 2 and 3. Guess what the common thing for them is? They play Clemson at home. Louisville plays Clemson on the road. Well, NC State plays Clemson on the road. Wake Forest plays them at home. Syracuse has to go on the road. So, again, it's kind of a weird thing. The fact that Clemson has to go to Tallahassee and up to Chestnut Hill, that gives you reason to believe that they might be contenders. Do you think either of those two can step up and maybe, whether it's steal a game, whether it's contend, what do you think happens with that triumvirate at the top, if you can call it a triumvirate between Clemson, Florida State, and BC?
One of the things I look at when you're a team like Clemson or at Alabama, any team that's been successful the last few years, you try to figure out if these teams don't play their best game, can they still beat you?
Right.
And the answer would be yes. However, we saw what happened when an unfortunate injury, and even before the injury happened, where Clemson struggled when they let an upstart Syracuse team, which was completely healthy at the time,
right,
wake up, and then suddenly that team gets confidence as they look at the clock and it's halftime, it's third quarter, and we're still up. And then suddenly now, in the pun intended, you get a tiger by the tail,
right?
And maybe you get paid. The only team I can see, just in my mind, the tremendous improvement they made last year is to look at that really salty defense that Boston College always has.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly the offense got explosive toward the end of the season. This team, conceivably, especially in Chestnut Hill, could be dangerous if the Tigers don't put them down early.
6 year under Steve Adazio, the interesting thing about them is that, you look at their 7-6 record. It's the same record they had in 16, but some of the differences involving the Clemson game, which was a 7-7 game in the fourth quarter. They lost that game 34-7. They lost to Notre Dame. They lost to Wake Forest. But they beat Louisville on the road. They beat Virginia, which, again, not very impressive because it's Virginia. They beat Florida State, kicked the behind of Florida State, 35-3. And that was Florida State late in the year. That was a Florida State team that went into Death Valley and battled Clemson to the death almost. I mean, that was a game that was a game in the third quarter.
That was their season. That was Florida State's season, was the Clemson game.
I mean, it was a 17-point victory for Clemson. But, again, it seemed like so many games for Clemson were in doubt longer than they would have liked them to be. The NC State home loss is a bit of I would say, a surprise. I think the emotional high of beating Florida State the way that they did, they never beat Florida State. So from that perspective, losing that game against NC State almost looked like it's a letdown game, and then they won over UConn and Syracuse at the end and lost in the Pinstripe Bowl to Iowa. I look at the defense, 5 of the 6 leading tacklers coming back. You have your leading rusher, your leading passer, and your leading 4 receivers coming back for Boston College. And what is the commonality there? They get Clemson at home. You look at Florida State, by contrast, and you have a lot gone from that defense that wasn't even very good last year. Yes, you get DeAndre Francois back. Yes, you get Cam Akers back. Yes, you get Jaquez Patrick back. But at the same time, we found out that even with James Blackman, any competent quarterback play could have made them look good. And yeah, they were 7-6. They backed their way into a bowl in Shreveport, for that matter. It just, to me, there should have been more talent on that team than there was, and there wasn't.
Well, I think what got them was when Francois went down. I think something happened in the chest and in the head. I thought the brain, just like when they were fired up against Clemson, they said this is our last stand, and they played Clemson off their feet and still lost by 17. Mm-hmm. And then they decided, okay, well, that's our season. And that's why they got drubbed by Boston College. They almost looked disinterested hitting the field against the Eagles. So they just had some problems last year. Their problem this year, Will, to me, is any problem that you have with a first-year staff. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of thinking going on the field and not enough reaction. Right. And we know football is a reaction sport. And when you have to hear different voices on the headset for the first time and then different
schemes,
scenarios
different
and that
languages,
sort of thing,
yes.
It's going to cost them some football games.
We'll continue the football talk with one of the most foremost football prognosticators in college football, Phil Steele. He joins us next here on Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. If you're a college football fan, you know you have the Phil Steele College Football Preview. We're pleased to be joined here on Sports Talk by Phil Steele. Phil, we'll start with the Clemson Tigers. Got themselves to the playoff a year ago. Phil, what are your thoughts on this team that has a quarterback controversy, but a lot of other things coming back?
Well, you know, after the season ended last year, I thought, boy, Clemson's going to really be in trouble on the defensive line because they're going to have 4 guys leaving early for the NFL draft. And then one by one, each of those guys opted to return. Farrell, Lawrence, Wilkins, Bryant, best defensive line in college football. All 4 guys could be playing in the NFL. And I feel the best defense in college football, and that's always a nice place to start. Offensively, Kelly Bryant can have his hands full holding off Trevor Lawrence. I actually projected Trevor Lawrence to take over the starting QB job this year. They've got Etienne in the backfield, solid receivers, veteran offensive line. Clemson's loaded. Now, they do have 4 tough road tests. They have to play Texas A&M, where Jimbo Fisher's group actually ranks in my top units in all 8 position categories. They have to play Georgia Tech, which is ready to be poised for a bounce-back season. Florida State, another team on a bounce-back season. And then a sleeper pick of mine in the ACC, Boston College. All 4 of those teams have to be faced on the road, but let's face it, Clemson's going to be favored in all 12 games they play this year. And they are my pick to run the table and get to the playoffs.
More on Lawrence because, you know, it's weird. We're seeing a lot more of these true freshmen before they come in here. We don't necessarily know what to expect. How much have you seen this shift where you have guys who come in here with a lot of experience and talent and can unseat somebody like Brian, who is an incumbent?
Yeah, it's a big change. And, you know, for years, everybody pretty much said, well, if you're going to play for a national title, you have to have a veteran quarterback. And then look who was playing in the second half of last year's national title game. A couple of true freshmen taking on each other. So it happens. And with Trevor Lawrence, I think the big advantage he had was being in for the spring, because now with the plethora of players that come in for spring practice, it gives them such a huge advantage. Instead of coming into the campus in the summer and trying to learn everything, they are there and have already gone and experienced it. And I think that's going to be enough to give Lawrence the advantage. So I think by the end of, or by the start of the season, I should say, I think Trevor Lawrence takes that job.
How much are you impressed about where Clemson's special teams has come? I mean, they've come a long way. This used to be a group that was almost kind of maligned, but now, you know, they had some kicker issues last year with the injury to Greg Hugel, but he's back. They've got a good punter in Will Spires, and obviously the return game is something that they're still trying to shore up.
Yeah, and I see improvement coming this year. I still didn't put them in my top units of the special teams, but it has been a sore spot for sure. We're talking about in my special teams rankings the last 4 years, Clemson's been number 100, number 96, number 66, and number 86. And Hugel, I think, was a big loss last year. When he went out, they struggled to find a reliable kicker. I think Hugel being back is going to be big. Spires has to improve a little bit on the net, 36-6 last year, but that was as his first year as a freshman punter, and I think that will improve. And as you mentioned, they need to find the return men, and still probably the weak spot of Clemson, but I see it as clearly improved this year.
Who in the Atlantic, as we're talking with Phil Steele here, the Phil Steele College Football Preview, if there is a team other than Clemson in the Atlantic that scares you, who is it?
I think the 2 teams that really jump out at me, one is Florida State, and I know everything that could go wrong went wrong with Florida State last year. But remember, even in Death Valley, in a season where they were struggling to get to 6 wins during the regular season, Florida State had the ball down 6 in the fourth quarter in Death Valley last year. So that could be scary. And when I talked to Coach Taggart this spring and went over the team with them, he was very happy with the talent that he inherited. And getting DeAndre Francois back at QB, they have one of the nation's best running back course, Cam Akers, Jack Patrick, and keep your eyes on the redshirt freshman, Kalen LeBourne. The receiving core looks good. The offensive line's been the weakness of the team probably the last couple of years, but Coach Taggart likes the unit he has. Defensively, they rate number 7 in my DL, number 13 DBs. So Florida State could be a team that makes some noise. And then the other one is what I touched on, Boston College. They really are a complete team this year. I mean, you look at them up front, they've got Zach Allen, Wyatt Ray Smith. Overall, they have my number 28 D-line. They're solid at linebacker, and in the secondary, the offensive line, I rate 6th best in the country. Coach Adazio, who I've talked to every year, he's been at BC, really likes his receiving core this year. The best set of wide receivers, best set of tight ends. And then there's that guy, A.J. Dillon. And once he emerged last year, Boston College was a completely different team in the second half of the season. He's back. They just need to get a steady quarterback play, and they could be pretty dangerous.
Switching gears here to USC. Phil, what are your thoughts on the Gamecocks?
I think if there's a team that's going to knock off Georgia in the East, it would be South Carolina. First of all, when you look at this team offensively, Bentley's back. He's now a junior. And I look for, in the spring, I watched the hurry-up offense, and I think that fits him better. So we're going to see a little bit more of the hurry-up offense. We're going to see a more effective Jake Bentley. And, of course, having his top guys back won't hurt either. Rico Dowdell was the top running back last year, went out with injury early, did return for the bowl, but here's a guy who I think they'll get much more out of at the running back spot. And then Deebo Samuel, arguably the playmaker on offense, wide receiver, kick returner, punt returner. He only started 3 games and went down last year with a broken leg. Getting him back is going to be huge. The offensive line looks solid. Talking to Coach Muschamp this spring, going through the defense, I like what I see out of each of the 3 units on the defensive side. In fact, all 3 units rank in my top units in the front of the magazine. They also have my number 17 special teams, and they get Georgia at home week 2. Georgia's a team that goes from 10 returning starters on defense all the way down to 5 returning starters. In fact, they were the 13th most experienced team in the country last year. This year, they're number 80. So they're vulnerable early in the season. That's when South Carolina gets them at home. You look at the rest of the road games for South Carolina: Vanderbilt, Kentucky, Mississippi, and even Florida fall in the winnable category in conference play. So if South Carolina was to knock off Georgia September 8th, then they would be a threat to winning the East and have that all-important tiebreaker over Georgia. That's going to be a big game this year.
I know in the magazine you picked Florida ahead of South Carolina. Is that just because Florida is the home game between the two of those?
Yes, and they have the softer schedule overall. You look at they only have 3 road games in the SEC, and they're against Tennessee, Mississippi State, and Vanderbilt. They got the neutral site game against Georgia. They actually play 2 FCS teams this year, and they have 19 returning starters. But I don't give them as much of a chance of knocking off Georgia as I do South Carolina.
How does Georgia replace all that they've lost from last year's team that got to the title game?
I'm going to say their defense goes from being a top 3 defense to a top 15 defense. Still very good offensively. They've got one of the best offensive lines in the country. They've got a quarterback situation going on as well, with Jake Fromm trying to fend off the true freshman Justin Fields. They do have DeAndre Swift, but they're not as deep in the backfield. Remember, last year, your number 3 running back was DeAndre Swift. Well, they don't have a number 3 running back in DeAndre Swift this year. So I think they are vulnerable. I still favor them in all their games. I think they'll be favored in all 12 games this year. Still pick them to win the East, but I could paint a scenario, and I did not place them in my 4 teams to make the playoffs, so basically because of that.
You have South Carolina going to Nissan Stadium. Going to be a nice little visit, possibly to Nashville there.
Yeah, that would be. And I think South Carolina is going to be a dangerous out in the bowl season. Last year, it seemed like they were sort of on their way to a loss against Michigan, but a great comeback win. And that confidence is really going to help them this year.
What are your thoughts on just Muschamp stabilizing this program from where it was after Spurrier left?
I think it's huge. I think towards the end of the Steve Spurrier era, I should say, I don't know if the recruiting was necessarily all there, and I think Will Muschamp has come in with the attitude. He's bringing in the recruits. Now, he hasn't had overly experienced teams, but he's got one this year. He's got my number 29 most experienced team in the country. Getting those 2 key players is back. I like what I see out of the defense. I think it's huge. And if you go back to the days when Muschamp was at Florida, he wasn't necessarily a bad coach. He kept losing his quarterbacks, had a bunch of injury-plagued outfits, and so I think he is a solid head coach.
You can order the magazine at philsteele.com. Also picking them up on newsstands as well. Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Books A Million, Target, Publix, and Barnes & Noble as well. What else can folks find at philsteele.com?
philsteele.com, you can get, as you mentioned, you can download the magazine actually to your iPhone, iPad, on Android device, or even your computer. philsteele.com will tell you how to do that. And then I also do a weekly newsletter called Inside the Press Box. And if you just go to InsideThePressBox.com, you can get, I actually pick every game for every weekend, and you can get more information on that. That's InsideThePressBox.com.
Phil, it's always good to catch up with you. Thanks so much. Looking forward to the season.
Always enjoy talking football with you, Will.
That's Phil Steele of the Phil Steele College Football Preview Recruiting when we come back on Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
By Founders Federal Credit Union. This is big. For a limited time, Founders Federal Credit Union's 5-year certificate is at its highest rate. Don't miss your chance. Visit foundersfcu.com or your local Founders office to apply. 800-956-7266 at SportsTalkSC on Twitter. We were asking you about the potential sleepers in the ACC. Ponyboy 2001 says all the other ACC teams outside of Clemson will be asleep during the 2018 season.
Ooh.
Here's the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why people are so down on NC State. I mean, Bradley Chubb does not, him leaving is not like, it doesn't completely kill them.
Their whole defensive line was drafted.
Yeah.
Weren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. You would think that they could replenish that, though, no?
But,
you're not going to get Bradley Chubb 2.0, but they got players, don't they?
Yeah. Well, the key point is, I said before, their quarterback return.
Yes.
And
I like him a lot.
And think about it. Clemson has had one of the top defenses in the nation the last few years.
Right.
And especially with this crew up front, they can cover up for a lot of mistakes. But guess, even though they lost the games, guess what offense kept running up points against that defense?
The Wolfpack.
It's the Wolfpack. What's the OC's name? I keep forgetting.
Elijah Drinkwitz.
Drinkwitz, yeah. And whatever Kool-Aid he's drinking.
Who they were looking for at USC to possibly replace my guy.
Yeah, who's now in Colorado, by the way.
Yeah.
But he was the guy who first approached their quarterback savior from California. So he knows his talent, but I think the personality got in the way in some instances with that offense. But yeah, NC State is dangerous, but I think if you looked at it like last year, Clemson's defense down the stretch would shut out the Wolfpack when they needed to, and they get a special teams play. I think they got the punt return, and their offense still prolific enough to beat the Wolfpack.
How long before Kurt Roper starts running the show in Colorado? Let's be real. How long? How long do you think that?
I'm not certain, but just as Muschamp learned some things with his tenure at Florida, and you could tell he's a better manager.
Right.
I think Roper has learned some things about getting everybody on the table instead of being one voice when you're in the meeting room.
Right.
Now, obviously, you got to be the one voice when it's game day, especially if you're the main play caller. But when putting the game plan together in those skull sessions, in those meetings, you have to be able to deal with a little bit more input from the people who work under you. I'm
wondering if he is going to learn while he's in Colorado not to yell BS in the middle of a fourth down play call. So a fourth down, was that? This was something you and I experienced this together. Which game was that? Was this Florida? I think it was Florida, or it might have been a game they lost. I forget.
No, I think it was a game. I think it was the game they won. It was a game they won.
Oh, you know what it was? It was Vanderbilt. It was the Vanderbilt home game, and there was some sort of play call. We were sitting there. You and I were sitting there in the press box, and the way the press box at USC is, where we sit, the offensive and defensive coaches box is right next to where the press box sits at Williams-Brice Stadium. And normally the glass is soundproof enough for us to not be able to hear what's going on. But all of a sudden, I think it was a third down play or whatever, or something like that, or a fourth down play. It was a short yardage situation. And all of a sudden, because the press box usually is a pretty silent place, there's no cheering, obviously, and stuff like that. But all of a sudden, we hear coming across the walls is the word you-know-what, BS, basically. He said the whole word. He didn't say BS. Mm-hmm. And we both looked there. We were just what's going on?
And then that's when I told you that sometimes the only thing you have to work with as a reporter or prognosticator is one or two words.
Right.
And that told me right there that there was a there was some miscommunication of somebody trying to tell him we should do this, or the reason why that play didn't work is because of this. And he just wanted to make sure that everybody knew he was the guy in charge.
Right.
And sometimes you got to just bite the bullet and say, look, I blew it. My call.
Right.
I blew it.
And I think they didn't get the first down from what I remember.
Exactly.
As is wont to, as basically they had that problem.
And if I think
the entirety of the year.
If I think about it, it was another one of the short yardage situations.
Yes.
And sometimes when you're in a short yardage situation, people don't understand this, but I really do agree with this, is sometimes you chunk that thing deep. It's
right.
open. If you would take and people just stack the deck against you if they think you just want to try to, man up and be macho and just try to run against the line when there's no hole there.
It's weird because when you think about them last year where they had their struggles, it might have come down like, and by them I mean South Carolina, you maybe could boil the season down to a dozen plays that didn't go their way. And if those plays change, or even half those plays change, you're looking at a double-digit victory season, maybe even a trip to Atlanta.
Well, let's just take 2 games here.
Kentucky.
Clemson is a game you didn't expect them to win.
No.
And Georgia would have been tough between the hedges the way they were going.
Right.
But the other games they lost.
I know exactly what you're talking
about.
They
were still in it. That Texas A&M game, Texas A&M was fit to be had.
I was at both those games you're talking about.
But then again, here the injury bug. The offensive line got banged up. And then suddenly Texas A&M, just blitz on every down. Let's just send the house on every down. And still they only won, by a touchdown.
Offensive lineman went down in that game, if I remember correctly.
The Kentucky game actually ended, if you want to think about it, karma-wise. I'm thinking karma now. That game ended before Debo got hurt.
Right.
What do I mean by that? 2 fumbles by Kentucky, and you cashed in on neither one of them.
Right.
And it was in Kentucky's territory. And that cost them late.
Well, Corn is playing the slots. We will deliver his recruiting report via surrogate. Dorman offensive lineman John Gillott is going to announce in mere moments where he's going to college. The offensive lineman from Dorman choosing between both Duke and USC. Westwood defensive back Cam Smith released a top 8 that includes USC, UNC, Georgia Tech, Tennessee, Georgia, and others. USC target athlete Trayvon Moss was offered by Arizona. Over the weekend, Clemson offensive line target Jake Hornibrook, of course, the brother of Alex Hornibrook, committed to Stanford. Spring Valley running back / defensive back Anthony Wilson committed to Wofford. Jalen Miller, senior linebacker, has committed to Furman University out of Burns. And 2021 infielder, you'll love this, a rising sophomore, has committed to the South Carolina Gamecock baseball team, an infielder by the name of Cole Messina. They say he also does some catching out of Somerville. So Cole Messina is the latest Gamecock commit of the 2021 class. Also, if you head to SportsTalkSC.com, a very detailed story with Phil talking to those close to very big, highly touted in-state basketball recruit Josiah James of Porter Gown. The 6'6" player has USC and Clemson very, very hard on his pursuit, and he's expected to make a decision at some point here in the near future. He, of course, won a gold medal with the under-18 Team USA team in Canada last month. He's back home in Charleston, and he will line up the official visits he will take in August. Right now, he plans to sign in November. Certainly a lot to at least unpack there. And again, more at SportsTalkSC.com. Recruiting is always available on our website, SportsTalkSC.com, and on Twitter. Just use the hashtag STRecruiting. It's a new day in the upstate, particularly at USC Upstate. They entered the Big South Conference officially on the 1st of July and did so with a new athletic director in tow. Daniel Feig will make his maiden voyage here with us on Sports Talk when he joins us at the top of the hour to discuss the Spartans' new venture into their new conference. That comes your way next as we kick off hour 2 of Sports Talk. Willie P and the Pro hanging it with you here on the 2nd day of July. Sports Talk continues after this on South Carolina Radio Network.
Round 2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show, 800-956-7266.
Welcome back, Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network on this Monday, the second day of July 2018, along with Professor Tom Hayes, yours truly, Will Pelagic, Phil Kornbluth, taking some R&R in the city of Sin. We hope you're enjoying yourself on this Monday. Email talkback at sportstalksc.com, on Twitter at sportstalksc, and the phone number 800-956-7266. We do want to let you know that we told you about the Dorman offensive lineman John Jalot making his decision between Duke and North Carolina. He has chosen the way of the devil, the blue devils, not the actual devil. Foosball is the devil. Just kidding. He is committed to Duke. The 2019 Dorman offensive lineman is heading to Duke. So we will see that go by the wayside. And we now are pleased to be joined by the athletic director, the brand new athletic director of USC Upstate, Daniel Feig, joins us here on Sports Talk as his Spartans have now entered the Big South Conference. It's funny, Daniel, you were a member of the Atlantic Sun, or at least an Atlantic Sun athletic director, for about a couple of weeks, and then and now you're in the Big South. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, guys, and thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity today. But you're right. I think that was probably the shortest tenure ever as an athletic director in a particular conference, and so I couldn't be happier, though, to move on to the Big South. We're really excited.
I'm wondering, just well, I'll talk about you taking the gig first before we talk about the conference move, but how much of the Big South move was an attraction for you taking this new gig?
It was definitely a strong consideration. You know, I think that the move to the Big South just shows that the institution is forward thinking, trying to take steps that would help us in a number of ways. First and foremost, you know, with our student athletic experience and allowing our students to really focus on class and not have all that missed class time, but also competitive reasons. You know, it's a conference that's filled with our peers. We're really excited about that. It's a regional conference, a bus conference we can drive to, you know, and it gives our fans an opportunity to come to all the games. So it was a big attraction for me to know that we're going to a conference where we could experience success and also provide a great experience to our kids.
Things have not been easy at Upstate. The basketball program has had some I guess, atrophy here. Dave Dickerson comes in and really kind of tries to stabilize that. What do you think is your biggest challenge, not just at Upstate, but with the conference move?
You know, I think the biggest challenge, you know, honestly, Will, it's basically just getting out of our own way and letting folks know who we are. You know, this school, if you've been on campus, it's absolutely stunning. It's beautiful. It's growing. It's vibrant. There's a palpable enthusiasm and energy here. And I think our biggest impediment to success is no one knows we're here. I think we've done a great job of keeping this secret to ourselves, and we're trying to get out of the way now and let the secret out. And so I think that we will experience success. Coach Dickerson in particular, fabulous coach, great experience. Obviously, he's coached at every level, and he's a man of such integrity and character. I know that he'll be a leader of young men and really develop them. So I think that there's a lot of reason for encouragement looking forward, and that we will experience success. But you're right. I know we'll have to build it, and he's signed a lot of new players. So it'll take us a little while to get there.
Yeah, I can remember when it was USC Spartanburg and they won an NAIA national championship a few eons ago. I'm old enough to remember that. And of course, USC Upstate has had a Rhodes Scholar at one point. So the school has been there for a while. But one of the things that got me, Daniel, was when we checked basketball scores around state teams, we'd always have to hit in our head Atlantic Sun because that's where USC Upstate is. But now you're in a conference, as you say, closer regionally. Do you think from this you can cultivate those really, especially in-state rivalries that's been missing because of the school being in the Atlantic Sun?
Definitely, Tom. I think so. You know, we're excited about that. And I think that looking at our footprint, I believe, you know, this is, by the way, is my 11th day on the job. So I'm learning a lot here about our institution and our history. But I believe somewhere between 80 and 85% of our alumni live in this region. And so all these institutions in the Big South, now including us, 4 in South Carolina, 4 in North Carolina, and 3 in Virginia, I believe, they're all in this region. So our alumni and fans, we have a natural base of support. And so I think that we can garner more of that enthusiasm and attention and engagement and drive them to our games and have a higher level of interest. And then 2, I think that we can, like you said, we can rekindle some old rivalries from the NAIA days. I believe when we were in District 6, Charleston Southern, maybe Winthrop and a few others, PC were in the conference with us. So we have a long history of playing with those schools. And then the other schools are natural rivals because of the geographic location and because of just the institutional size, scope, and mission. We share so much in common with the schools in the Big South on so many levels. So it just makes sense.
You come more from the coaching / compliance side as opposed to the donations side of things when it comes to this athletic director gig. And there are so many different avenues that folks get to being the athletic director. What do you think is your greatest asset, and what do you think is the thing you have to learn the most, at least stepping into this maiden voyage as an AD?
That's a great question, right? First of all, again, I'm very excited to be here and have this opportunity. I think my greatest strength is probably having been a practicing lawyer and a college student athlete. Just I think I have a depth of knowledge and experience in college athletics and an analytical way of looking at things, assessing issues, and finding creative solutions. And so I feel certain, based on my experience in history, and that I can help guide our institution and our athletic department to success and navigate some issues along the way as they always seem to pop up. As far as things to learn, I don't know. There's so much, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so I feel certain that there'll be some issues that'll pop up along the way that we'll have to address as they come. But I'm certainly excited about the challenge. I'm excited to be here, and I just think this is such a vibrant university and has so many things going for it.
Well, the area you have to sell, obviously, still burgeoning growth area when you take in totality all of the upstate. How much of an advantage do you think that will be to you as you cultivate this athletic program?
I think it'll be a tremendous advantage. I believe our university, from what I've heard here in the last 2 weeks, that we expect to enroll the largest class in our history, and we expect to have our largest enrollment. And I don't think that's a coincidence. It's a result of our new leadership here, Dr. Kelly, our chancellor, who's been here about 15 months. And also, like you said, a result of the growth and explosion in growth of the location of the whole upstate. It's such an exciting time to be here. I know that the economy is booming. People are moving in, and it makes perfect sense for us to partner with our region and start offering more and more programs that appeal to the folks in the area. And that's what Dr. Kelly is doing, and it's helping drive some enrollment to our university. So I think it's a great time to be a Spartan on all fronts.
I know one thing about this state. We have a very welcoming group when it comes to the administrators, not just the coaches, but also the directors of athletics. Who has reached out to you in your very short time? Have you heard from Ray Tanner? Have you heard from the AD at Clemson? Have you been able to kind of get yourself and get your feet wet around those people?
Yes. I mean, I have heard from, well, first of all the athletic directors have reached out to me in the Big South, which is exciting. And then a number of friends and acquaintances around the state. So I've had folks from South Carolina, from Clemson, reach out, and I'm trying to set up meetings now to go down and meet some of those folks that I've met. Some of the people you mentioned before, but haven't had the opportunity to reconnect with them since I've been here. But I'm looking forward to it. It's such, like you said, such a welcoming, hospitable state. I found that to be the case so far. And I'm just looking forward to building those relationships for our university in the future.
We'd like to think we grilled you harder than Dr. Kelly did, but we hope it wasn't as painful. Hope you get some success, some modicum of success while you're at USC Upstate. Best of luck on the job, and thanks so much for talking with us.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
That's Daniel. That's Daniel Feig joining us here, the new athletic director at USC Upstate. As you mentioned, Pro, it's an uphill battle there trying to get the word out for them, but we hope we at least provided a little help for him and his program. Back in a moment. Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. Appreciate Daniel Feig joining us here. As you know, I hate to belabor the point. Like I said, going out of the break, that is a tough gig, and I don't mean to say that as a disparaging thing towards USC Upstate, but they're a school that's about the size as, would you say what the size is Winthrop, and I would say a little bigger than Wofford, right?
Well, yeah, Wofford deliberately, because of its private school status, they want to stay in that 1,500 student level.
Yet Wofford, in that same city, I hate to compare, but Wofford has more of a footprint. Jerry Richardson helped that, obviously, but I think again, his biggest, Mr. Feig's biggest challenge, I think, is to find high-level donors and just to spread the message. Like, you got to get out there and you got to hit the ground running with that.
Well, yeah, and they got a lot of industry in the area, in the upstate.
It's growing.
It's a tremendous, even when I lived there in another lifetime, the college atmosphere is great there in Spartanburg. I like the variety of terrain. Quite frankly, once you get to Columbia and then go further south, the land turns a lot of flat on you, but you got a lot of hills and stuff up there in the upstate, which is a change of pace if you like to a little bit of variety in your terrain. But it's a beautiful area, and I think what helps them out really is to be in a conference with schools right around this area.
I say relative anonymity in the Atlantic Sun.
When the Atlantic Sun, everybody had to grapple to find the score at night. Well, wait a minute, there's one basketball score we're missing. Hold it, wait, that's right. USC Upstate that's in the Atlantic Sun.
Well, it's weird. We asked the same question about that with Coastal in a way, because Coastal, while they're going up a level,
right?
They have that to contend with, and the fact that they have a Sun Belt conference where they're probably spending more money on travel than they've ever have in their history, not just for football, but for baseball, for all the other sports that they have, basketball too. We talked about this with Cliff Ellis in the fall. He said, not only do we have to get our numbers up and get our athletics up to the point where we can have players that can compete in this particular conference, but we also have to get our fundraising up, because the travel that we're having to spend on is much more strenuous than we had in our previous arrangement.
Now, one athletic, and it depends on the athletic program and what their goals are, because here in state, one of the goals that College of Charleston had when they changed and got into their conference was the fact that they know they're in a tremendous vacation spot, a city that has a lot of culture, and of course this little thing called the Atlantic Ocean that's sitting there.
That's big.
And they figured that if we get into CAA and we go up and down the Eastern Seaboard, we start to grab student athletes and regular students down to Charleston, because they gain familiarity with the College of Charleston as they play teams in the DC area all the way up to Boston and Northeastern. So that was their goal, to really diversify and get into a conference where they are spread out.
And the thing about it, well, again, but the other part of that too, that USC Upstate will get, that Coastal is going to have to try and manufacture, is, like you said, rivalries.
Yes.
Like USC Upstate, you're going to have natural rivalries now with Presbyterian, Winthrop, and Charleston Summit.
Yeah.
In addition to your own intercity rivalry you have with Wofford whenever you play there as well. In the Southern Conference, obviously they go cross-conference for that to try and play those games. But at the same time, you have to kind of cultivate your own way. And I even remember this, having covered the conference switch from Missouri and Texas A&M into the Southeastern Conference. You can look at some of those situations and even some of the other ones that have developed when it comes to conference realignment. And again, a lot of that is more due from money than it is for prestige. But who has really Nebraska developed the rivalry with in the Big Ten rather? Iowa, maybe. Have they developed the rivalry with Illinois? I don't know. I mean, Missouri hasn't really developed the rivalry in the SEC. A&M had a natural rivalry with LSU and one with Arkansas dating back to the Southwest Conference. But other than those two, you really don't have a lot of identity with that school. So from that perspective, and even South Carolina, South Carolina has built a little rivalry here with Florida. They've built a little bit of a rivalry with Missouri based on things that have happened off the field, the Mayor's Cup and that whole thing. But, I mean, who is South Carolina's in conference rival other than maybe Georgia?
Well, that's
basically done because of proximity.
That's proximity, but they used to play Georgia when they were independent,
right?
And when they were in the ACC. The big thing I think probably right now is when you look at the recruiting which is happening, the rivalry is almost more vicious off the field than it is on the field,
right? Because
Tennessee used to come in here and cherry pick players,
right?
Georgia the same way. And when did Tennessee start to slack off? When suddenly Clemson and South Carolina started locking up the borders,
right.
And those guys weren't coming out of state and going to Tennessee. In fact, what are we seeing now? Tennessee and Clemson going into South Carolina and Clemson going into Tennessee,
right,
and getting players out of there.
And
so
the kid from Memphis going out there as well, with Kevion Mullins. And a thing too that I find interesting as a lot of this continues to morph, and I go from micro to macro here when it comes to the way that college sports is changing. Everyone's kind of fighting for the same footprint.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that scares me, is that it's harder for a school like a USC Upstate to say, I want a seat at the table, because of the Power 5 autonomy, because of what happens when it comes to things like, the pay-for-play movement and things of that nature. And you're starting to lose the – Corn likes to talk about this all the time, the purity of college athletics and the purity of playing for a school. And that's a very utopian way of thinking about it. But in my mind too, Pro, so much about where we are in college athletics right now is that you have a ceiling a lot of times. And while USC Upstate with this conference move has raised its ceiling, you wonder how close they'll get to its ceiling, because it's one thing to be kind of propped up against your ceiling like Coastal was when you were trying to figure out, okay, do we want to move up a level? Do we want to stay where we are, where we're dominating at the level that we are, or do you want to try and raise our ceiling, raise that up? The problem is you have to deal with that dichotomy. Do you want to be near your ceiling? Or do you want to raise your ceiling to maybe an untenable level where you can't even get close?
Well, I think a lot of alumni from Coastal Carolina would have told you 20 years ago, there's no way we go into Division I football.
Right.
But that has happened. And under Eddie Payne, who used to be, I think, at Wake Forest at one point, and he was an assistant at South Carolina years ago, a very good basketball coach who stepped down just about a year ago. But he had some teams at USC Upstate, and one that threatened to win the title there. In fact, I remember when Frank Martin first got to South Carolina, and he was just putting together a ragtag team, and he looked at his schedule. He said, I noticed USC Upstate is on the schedule. Do we have to play them? They're better than we are right now.
Right.
So he didn't want to have anything to do with the USC Upstate. And of course, USC Upstate, I think, came down here and beat South Carolina that year. So they've been close to tasting what can be at USC Upstate, and they gave Florida Gulf Coast a few battles when they had their teams that were going real good under Andy Enfield, who's now at Southern California.
Right.
Yeah. So the
former Florida Gulf Coast headman.
Yeah, the area that they are in that Spartanburg area and the Upstate, they should be able to recruit
fertile
players.
Very fertile.
There. It's just now only thing you have to do is cultivate the athletic program, and time will tell.
Appreciate Mr. Fine joining us here, and we'll have that interview for you here on SportsTalkSC.com after the show is over. We'll come back. I want some more SEC thoughts and also some of yours as well at 800-956-7266. I want to talk about the one team that I think is getting way too much love.
These guys, they never sleep. Check them out on the web at SportsTalkSC.com. Now, more of Sports Talk on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Welcome back, Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Willie P. and the Pro here with you. As you noted during the break, Pro, a smattering of interleague play across baseball, which includes basically my nightmare World Series, not just because of the fact that I have, I would say, enmity between me and the two teams playing, but the Braves and the Yankees are facing off. And not only would that be my Nightmare World Series because the team's involved, but because I would have to play referee between you and Korn because of your Braves and his Yankees. Yankees leading 1-0, by the way, in the second inning, thanks to the 23rd home run of the year for Aaron Judge. No, I will not say all rise, Korn. I will not say all rise for the Judge.
Oh, man.
Anibal Sanchez pitching for Atlanta.
Oh.
So
Well, no, I don't.
In that little bandbox ballpark they've built in the Bronx for the New York Yankees.
Well, you trying to tell me that the
I'm questioning the ballpark's character, bro. Yes, I am. The dimensions and the wind tunnel. There's something finicky. I've always hated that new ballpark.
The one ballpark that I think probably there's two. I think that the dimensions are somewhat questionable, or
there's more than two.
Philadelphia and Cincinnati, the Great American Ballpark, for some reason.
Yes,
in Cincinnati, those dimensions do not look right to me.
The person who used to sit in this chair, K-Mac, you remember him? He and Korn are having a nice little Twitter spat right now because of the NBA free agency frenzy involving, of course, LeBron James going to K-Mac's Lakers. Korn seems to think that the Lakers are destined to be third in the West. I almost think that's generous, but he would say third in the West is better than any team in the East. So I don't know. I don't know how to handicap that.
I think probably when I look at the West, Utah may be a better team now than the Lakers. That's consummated at this point.
Houston obviously still very strong.
But let's face it. As the years go by, the people who talk about the history of the NBA, they always mention the Celtics and the Lakers. You even hear Lakers and Celtics more than you would hear about Michael Jordan's Bulls,
right? Because
of the history,
right?
And I think the powers that be, especially when we're talking about Magic Johnson at this point, you're seeing the Lakers almost move, I wouldn't say in the anonymity, but it almost an afterthought in the West. And by golly, you got to look, up the turnpike, and there's Golden State that's getting all the love. Now, I think they signed LeBron because LeBron, this is his last go round.
Right.
And I think his family wanted to be somewhere where the weather was good. I think his wife had a lot to do with this decision.
Yes.
People can talk about places you can do business now. Anybody can do business with a laptop now. I don't care if you're in Timbuktu.
Right.
So I think it's more of a family situation. And I think the Lakers now have instant credibility.
Right.
The problem with instant is once it's cooked, it's over.
Right.
So the LeBron you get today may not be the LeBron 2 years from now.
He's crossed the hill.
Yeah,
he's over the hill. He's coming down. So you're getting a diminishing level of return on him. So you better strike while the proverbial iron is hot there, because the other thing that this also doesn't make sense to me is that they're getting LeBron at 33 for 4 years, and that almost makes it sound like they're looking at a accelerated rebuild. I don't know if you can get the assets to turn that into an accelerated rebuild that gets them to the finals within the next year or two, especially because that team that plays in Silicon Valley is not getting any worse, if you know what I mean. I don't care if they get JaVale McGee.
Well, one of the difficult things about when you look at a Golden State, and let's face it, a lot of the NBA has to do, especially if you're an inside-out team, is the way the game is officiated. And I've always said, when Golden State has those long-distance shooters all clicking at the same time, it's almost, and let me use the term loosely, they're almost cheat-proof. You can't call questionable fouls when a guy is 30 feet away from the basket, as opposed to guys who are used to scoring inside get hit and there's a lot of contact and no call.
Well, it's weird because that's the antithesis of the way LeBron tries to play. So in a way, it's contrasting.
Well,
stuff.
LeBron gets the 007 treatment that I said Jordan got.
Right.
007, license to kill. The only difference between them is they don't Jordan didn't order a martini shaken, not stirred.
Exactly. Exactly. Back to the football for a second, just because I had this teed up for this segment. Give me a pretender in each conference that Clemson and South Carolina's purview. Give me a pretender in the SEC East and a pretender in the ACC Atlantic, schools that are getting too much juice in your mind.
I would probably see it's close with me because I'm thinking in terms of Tennessee think they can turn it around quickly.
Ooh,
but
I didn't think about them. That's good though.
But I will say this. I think because of his reputation he's developed of being a quarterback whisperer and being there before, I think people think that Florida hire Dan Mullen, add water, and we've got the East
right
wrapped up.
Right.
First, they got to find their quarterback,
and they don't have them there on campus.
Florida's best quarterback is now up the road in West Virginia, and his name is Will Grier.
No, Florida's best quarterback is playing Double-A baseball for the Rumble Ponies right now, formerly playing for the Columbia Fireflies. Also, just saying.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best quarterback that they have on. At least, I don't say he has eligibility left, but you know what I mean. That's the thing. It's just like Felipe Franks is still your quarterback. Like, that's the thing. And it's the thing with the other Florida school, Florida State. That is obviously something that I look at and I say, you know what? People will talk so much about DeAndre Francois not necessarily being there and the fact that was such a thing. They were more than just a bad quarterback away from being bad. It's to me, in my opinion, there were more than just the one quarterback away from having success last year. Jack is calling from Lake Bowen on Sports Talk here on a Monday. What's going on, Jack? How are you? Jack, are you there? Jack, are you there? I guess we do not have him. I guess we had Jack, and I guess we have no Jack, I guess you could say. So here on Sports Talk, we will continue to chat. But again, too much about what's happening with Florida State is, in my opinion, if you look at the way that they've built their program, they built it around talent, but a lot of that talent, again, was unrealized, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think probably when they lost to Alabama the way they did, got their quarterback knocked out, I think psychologically something happened to that team last year. I didn't think their offensive line played that well in that game, and I think Alabama psyched them out. I think that was a big key as far as that's concerned. But Florida State does have the athletes. There's no doubt about it. But Francois, I think he's going to have a rebuild as far as from the neck up is concerned. Felipe Franks the same way, because sometimes you see Felipe Franks do things that other quarterbacks can't do, and maybe Dan Mullen is the guy that takes the lid off that talent and harnesses. So that will be interesting to see there at Florida. That will be his big thing right there. Can he shape Felipe Franks into a quarterback?
I don't know. I just think that I look at Florida the same way I look at Canada. They always think they have more than what they actually have. That's the way. That's the way. People from Canada are awful pompous. Just like people from Florida are awful pompous.
Well, Phil, I mean, Will Muschamp, when he left Florida, he left a lot on defense. A lot of talent on defense was still on that team. It's just that they still could not cultivate the quarterback, and that cost Florida. If any team, if one position you could point at where it could really give a team just self-destruct, it was Florida and the quarterback position.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
Thing.
You're a Mets fan.
That's crazy. Welcome back, Sports Talk South Carolina. As we continue, we had Jack from Lake Bowen on hold with us, but now we got him back, and so he's going to join us here on Sports Talk. Jack, welcome to Sports Talk. What's going on?
Thank you. I enjoy your show, and I really enjoyed the interview with the athletic director at Upstate.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter actually, she'd kill me for saying this, but she interviewed him for that job, and she had told me that he was a very, very, really go-get-em guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he sounds like from the interview that he was. But Tom knows more about this than anything else as far as Upstate and the other schools, especially Wofford. Of course, Upstate doesn't have a football team, but the rest of their athletic program at Upstate, with the exception of basketball right now, and before they got Coach, what's his name?
Dickerson.
Coach at Wofford. Well, no, the coach at Wofford.
Oh, okay.
Real good coach.
Yes.
Young, Ron Young. Before they got him, the basketball programs were even, and Coach Eddie Payne did a wonderful job. And most people don't realize his back was so bad that on away ball games, they had to put him in a van laying down because he couldn't stand the pain of riding. But now, both my children graduated from Wofford. So, I mean, it's not that I'm a biased person for Upstate, but I would really love to, and most people here would love to see Upstate play Wofford.
Mm-hmm.
And Richard Johnson is the one that stands in the way of that. Might as well go ahead and say that. Because he and Coach Waters had a dust-up back when both of them were coaching. Tom probably remembers it. And, they had a little dust-up, and from then on, they wouldn't play each other. And Coach Waters has been retired for 15 years. Good Lord, let it go. But anyhow,
it's a new day dawning, and I think you would think at this point in time they would kind of, because I can remember when Coastal and South Carolina would not play in any sport, but now they're doing that now. So a lot of those things you got to just blow over because it's good to have an in-city rivalry like that, in my opinion.
I would like to see that happen. Grudges are very fickle things.
Yeah,
I know that because I was raised by a. I hate this. I won't say anything mean about my mother the day before her birthday, but legendary grudge holder, Italian Catholic woman. I would say a lot of those are very justified, though. A lot of those are very justified. So I just came from spending a week with them, so I guess I can get a shot in while I can.
Well, remember that they can hear it on the internet anywhere in the world. Look out.
They can.
Just play it. If you hate a team, just grit your teeth a little tighter when you're playing.
I would say the best revenge is winning.
Yes.
Wouldn't you say? Instead of holding a grudge? But who knows? Again, he and you know more about that little tiff than I could ever want to know. But the fact of the matter is, like you said, it's a thing that you have to deal with. Speaking of tiffs inside the state, there is a definite I would call it a clamoring, if you will, between a bunch of cities. 6, in fact, according to what USC Athletic Director Ray Tanner told us late last week, that are still bidding or that bid for the neutral site game with Clemson and South Carolina. Greenville, North Augusta, Charlotte, Myrtle Beach, Charleston, Joe Riley Park, and Spirit Communications Park in Columbia for the honor of hosting the middle contest between South Carolina and Clemson. The fact that it's garnered as much interest as it is tells you how much this state cares about college baseball.
Yes.
But it also stands to reason also that there might be some, I don't want to say dissension, or maybe even a distaste with the way that last year's contest seemed so very, not one-sided, but I guess one-sided from a fan perspective necessarily. I would say there was a lot of dissension about the fact that Greenville Greenville had such a lot of orange involved, which again we've seen Garnet there when that program's done well as well.
Well, the thing about it is this state is you can get anywhere in the state within a 4-hour drive, but the key point is the first thing I thought about was if you're going to have a neutral site game, first thing I thought about was North Augusta, the newest stadium, and the fact that, we looked it up. I mean, Clemson, I think, 55, 60 miles an hour, you get to North Augusta in about 58 minutes, in about an hour.
Right.
You leave from Columbia to North Augusta, you get to North Augusta in about an hour.
Right.
So that's the first thing I thought of. But then again, I think about the other sides, other parts of the state. There are Clemson and South Carolina fans in every corner of the state.
Right. I would know. I've basically been at every corner of the state this past week.
If you're worried about travel, first of all, you negate Charlotte.
Yeah.
Because it's across the border. You're taking money across the border. Don't do that.
I don't like Charlotte, and I don't think Myrtle Beach is practical.
Myrtle Beach is only practical if you want to go out there once every blue moon.
Right.
Charleston, I look at the same way. Other than the fact that I know there's a lot of Clemson and South Carolina fans.
You have to start the series in Charleston or end it there.
You almost want to see a 3 rotation at the most, and that is Greenville, Columbia, at the minor league ballpark
at Spirit,
and because I understand they put in a pretty good bid.
Yes.
And money talks. North Augusta is the third, and North Augusta to me is
Clemson people are not going to like that if they play
North Augusta. Oh, in Spirit,
they would not like that.
Yeah, but it's a lot. No, but if you played
unless the money is made public and it's like, that much.
If you played in Spirit,
right,
and they divided the tickets right down the middle.
That's what they do anyway.
Yeah, I'm saying I don't see any problem with that because you're going to go to Greenville,
right,
in the third year.
But then again, if they divide the tickets down the middle, people will wonder, well, how the heck is it? How the heck is there so much orange there?
Because somebody's selling their tickets.
Of course, that's the issue. And I think that South Carolina fans, if they have a vitriol that they have to unleash it at your own fans.
Yes.
For selling tickets to Clemson people. That's the thing that I think you have to think about from that perspective is the fact that, and I like the Greenville setup just from the standpoint of where it puts everything. Having said that, though, I think, like you said, the rotation aspect, I think, needs to come into play here a little bit because I think that everyone should get a piece of this, not to sound socialistic or socialist in a way, but I do think that for the betterment of the state, you should have a rotation, whether it's Greenville, North Augusta, Charleston. I think that's a good triumvirate to have, I would say, because
you have fans all over the state,
right?
And sometimes a person, say in Charleston, can't make it up to Greenville,
right?
Or to Clemson,
right,
for the game, and you bring the teams down to them. I think it's only right that you do that at some point.
It is I would say, best road show weekend that we get here in the state. And the fact that you're able to possibly spread that across would be a good thing. Again, tomorrow we will have a special edition of SC Wild. We'll be here 2 hours with Captain Billy Donner from the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. July 4th safety, basically round table. We'll talk about some of the different things that go on around the 4th of July and make sure that you're being safe on the water and across our state, trying to make sure you are safe with your outdoors. Again, 4th of July, we'll have our special 4th of July look back at the spring, look ahead to the fall with all the programs in the state. And then we're back with our normal set of shows Thursday and Friday. Thursday, we're going to talk to Mark Tucker, Charleston Southern football coach. Looking forward to that. And also our usual suspects with Mike Morgan and the money coach, Fran Halloran. Until then, we will talk to you here on Sports Talk. For Professor Tom Hayes and the vacationing Phil Kornblut, Frank Halloran behind the bulletproof glass. I'm Will Pelagic saying so long. Thanks for listening to Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network.